Good morning and welcome to the Raben Report. I'm your host, Elliot Raben, so get ready to get triggered. Good morning and welcome to the Raben Report. I'm your host, Elliot Raben, as you might have heard in our intro. And with me today, only Adam and Marshall. But, how are you guys?
We're great.
Good.
Well, I can't speak for Marshall, but I'm good.
I'm good. Yeah, I'm good.
Thank you. I'm glad that you guys could make it. I don't know, Daniel unfortunately couldn't make it for this episode. But as Celine, our hearts will go on.
Exactly.
Again, obligatory Celine reference. I'm going to tell you about my Halloween last night, so you guys are going to enjoy this. So to begin, as per Spirit Live, rules and regulations, all opinions expressed on the show are not those of Ryerson or Ryerson faculty and are only those of the individual commentators. Viewer discretion is advised. So I actually want to start with what you guys did for Halloween. How was it? What did you guys do? I want to know.
Marshall, you go first.
Well, I didn't do anything for Halloween night. Would have been last night. I just kind of stayed in, did some homework, went to the gym. On Saturday night, my girlfriend and I went to a party out in the beaches, some of her old friends, and had a really good time. Did kind of like a impromptu like army costume. Not really like a full thing. Just kind of went to the army surplus store and grabbed like a really cheap shirt and some dog tag necklace and some other camo apparel, and we both looked very good, if I do say so myself, and it was a very good time.
Very nice. And Adam?
I didn't go out Saturday, and I went out last night, which is what people shouldn't be doing. I went to the campus bar. Mm-hmm. It was pretty slow at the beginning, but then there was this like wave of people that came in, and like the thing about campus bars is that the bar itself isn't like, you know, the best place on earth, but it's the people that make the night good. Mm-hmm. So I had a few drinks, played some pool, had good talks with some pals. People couldn't really guess my costume. I was Ned Flanders for Halloween. I was walking through, people were like, "Hey, Pablo Escobar, hey, Walter White," and I'm like, "No, watch The Simpsons."
It's a sad day when people don't pick up a Ned Flanders costume immediately.
Right? Like, The Simpsons is the oracle of life for me, especially.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Grew up on that.
Yeah, exactly. So there were a couple of people that were like, "Hey, Flanders, Hadley Doodley," and I was like, "Hadley Doodley, yay!" So yeah, that was my Halloween.
How about you, Elliot?
Me? Well, in the meantime, before I do, I just want to let the viewers know, comment and tell us what you did for Halloween, and then Marshall will read them out loud. For Halloween, what did I do? Well, I didn't expect to do much. Mm-hmm. One thing I was really looking forward to was that Krispy Kreme was offering like a free donut to people in costumes. So
really?
I walked 15 minutes all the way to Krispy Kreme.
That's worth it.
And when I got there, I'm like, "Hi, I'm here for my free donut." And do you want to know my costume?
Celine Dion?
Close. It was Celine Dion's Superfan.
Oh, okay.
And everybody's like, "Elliot, you can't go as yourself." And I'm like, "I just did." So, I got there and I'm like, I'm here for my free donut. They're like, "Sorry, that's an American thing. We don't do it here." I'm like,
"Oh man,
what?"
That's
so
rough.
I backed away for about a minute, and I was like, "Hi, I'd like to buy one donut." I didn't walk here for no reason. So anyway, I had my donut and I had to like kill 7 hours because I had to come into the studio and do something, right? You know, like prepare it, right? Yep. And then my friend Briar, you guys know Briar.
Yeah,
she was on the show, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so she's like, "Elliot, I want to go drink wine with you on Church Street."
Okay.
And I'm like, "Okay." And I had to figure out like what to do with my car. It was at Finch. Long story short, I didn't get ticketed, which is great, even though you're not supposed to leave it overnight, but they know that. And we were drinking and we were on Church Street. And note to self, if you're going to be a straight guy wearing a Celine Dion t-shirt, do not do it in the middle of church in Wellesley. Because I got hit on so much that I was like,
Hey,
Jesus.
that's flattering.
It's a nice confidence boost.
It's flattering. I was like, wow. I mean, if I can get the same effect with the opposite gender, that'd be great. Yeah. But I mean, hey, I took it as a compliment. But yeah, just note to self. And that was our Halloween.
All right.
So let's move on to the actual weekly recap. I don't know if we really want to talk about Halloween cultural appropriation, just costumes that you can and can't wear. What do you guys, the viewers, think about that? Comment on our live feed. What do you think? Is there a line that
the line for me is very arbitrary because it's very arbitrary for people what can and cannot be offensive. So for me, it's always like the general costumes every year, like the Native American headdress. I don't think that's very cool. I think it's very tasteless and just generally not creative. I get very creative with Halloween, so that kind of stuff offends me, both culturally and investment in the costume wise. The one costume that really did it for me this year was Anne Frank. I was like, okay, I don't know how you can have an Anne Frank costume.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, that's a little too far. Normally, every year, there's always one that does it for me. Like this year, I think it was a toss-up between Anne Frank and Colin Kaepernick when people were going blackface. And I was like, okay, I don't agree with this. This is not cool in like every measurable regard. So yeah, it's the same argument every year. What's cool and what's not. And for me, those two, and plus the Native American headdress and all that stuff.
So like there was a costume at some party store. It was like a rabbi. Would you think that's cultural appropriation? Because personally, I think that's hysterical, and I would dress up like that.
See, that's the thing. Like that's why I'm saying offense is very arbitrary. Because I find the rabbi costume hilarious. Because it's like this gross exaggeration of what a rabbi is. And it's basically just, let's animate an Orthodox Jew. That's what
Yeah.
And I find that very funny, even being, Jewish. And for some people, like I was in the Halloween store and there was an Egyptian costume, like a pharaoh. And there were a couple of Egyptians walked by that sort of like kissed their teeth at the costume. And I was like, hey, I get that. But at the same time, I would totally be an Egyptian pharaoh. So like, it goes both ways.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe I'm desensitized. I am desensitized. I'll fully admit it. I think I've been exposed to such offensive material for so long in the darkest corners of the internet, and I say that in terms of people making awful jokes and things like that. I don't get offended when I see a costume like that. However, I do recognize the distastefulness. But I think that it's important to hold all things like that to the same standard. So a native headdress, for example, and a rabbi or a priest or anything like that, I think that when people describe why a native headdress is offensive, in what I usually hear is people saying because that's something that's earned, that's something that you don't just get to buy at a store, it's earned. The same thing with a rabbi's traditional garb or a priest's cassock. That is also something that's earned, and for that reason, I hold them to the same standard. And that standard is, wear it if you want. You're gonna have people who are gonna be angry with you no matter what you wear. If you wear anything that has to do with culture in any way, I personally don't see a huge deal when it comes to something that's like Anne Frank. I mean, again, I do not gasp or freak out over it, but I absolutely see that that's very distasteful. That's a tragedy, right? Like, or anything that has to do with a tragedy, making light of a tragedy. I don't think it's a good idea. I don't think it's absolutely heinous though. But I wouldn't do it. I would not want my friends to do that. But if somebody else on the street's doing that, it's not a big deal to me. But I think that's just me. I do totally recognize that I'm not in the majority here. I think most people do see that as more of an issue than I do, and that's fine. But when it comes to my personal opinion, I don't really care, as long as it's not absolutely horrible in terms of a tragedy or things like that.
Fair enough. And it's good that you both have differing opinions on this. So let's move on to something less political. There was a private member's bill introduced about a new bylaw against texting and walking across the street. Do you think that's a problem? Do you think that
it can be enforced?
Well, if
nice.
if people see you walking across the or cops see you walking across the street texting, they can give you a ticket. Is the idea? Do you think that's a good idea to stop it, because like so many people just walk into poles, they can get hit by cars, like it can be a problem in some cases.
The thing is, with that kind of stuff, you're beating you can't like put that kind of legislation in place, because it'll work sometimes and then it'll work another time. Let's say I'm walking across the street, I get a ticket, I'm like, you know what, yeah, I'm never going to text again. 2 months later, I can like almost guarantee you I'll be walking and texting at the same time. Number two, you're an idiot if you text while you cross the street. You have about 30 seconds where you just have to be alert, put down your phone for 30 seconds, answer whatever you were answering before you cross the street, after you cross the street. It's like it's no greater than a minute of time that you have to be technologically disconnected and just focus on the license plate that's going to hit you if it does. Like it's a very short period of time.
This law for me goes completely against everything that I think should go into making a law. I don't believe in protecting people from themselves, and especially with something like this, like the only time I would ever support a law, and I suppose this is me becoming significantly less authoritarian as opposed to a year ago, because I never would have said this a year ago, but I mean, passing laws that protect culture, that kind of curb degeneracy, for lack of a better term, are fine. But this is a law that just is protecting people from their own silly choice that they make. And I'll admit, I cross the street while texting sometimes, and just
Shame.
as of recently, actually, I was just walking home the other day and I realized, like, damn, like, I really got to stop doing this. This is not a good idea. I'm going to get hit by a car one day. So I've actually completely stopped texting whilst crossing the street. And I recommend everybody do the same. I do see a lot of people do it, and it's very silly. But a law is so unnecessary. Even if it's just a bylaw where you're going to get a ticket, that's just absolutely ridiculous. I think it's government overreach, protecting people from their own silly choices, which is so unnecessary. It's such a waste of time and money and resources, and just, I don't think they should bother.
I think to me it also seems like a cash cow for police.
Yeah.
I don't think that's cool either.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Because it doesn't come down to safety, because you can be there 1 minute and then not there the other minute.
Yeah,
so.
you're not endangering anybody by...
And if anything, you'll be disrupting so much traffic if you stop someone for texting.
And, like, you know, there's lots of things that can distract you while you're crossing the street, not just texting. What are they going to illegalize or criminalize, like, rubbernecking if you see something beside you?
Or neon signs.
Yeah,
or anything
exactly.
Like that. Yeah.
It's very silly by law.
Interesting take on it. Yeah, I personally don't think it's a good idea. Yeah, I don't think it can be enforced either. Lastly, which we should, unfortunately we have to breeze by for like literally 1 minute, Kevin Spacey. That is an issue altogether.
I'm tilted.
It's all a matter of the way that it was framed, because some news organizations said, that, he's a pedophile, and then some literally just said he came out as gay, and it's like, was the timing right? Like, how do you justify
that was awful. And when we talked about Harvey Weinstein last time, did I not say that over the next few months or years, we will see Hollywood revealed as the vile cesspool of depravity that it is?
Yeah.
And we're going to see more of this. Andy Dick, surprise, surprise, just is facing sexual assault accusations now. Like, at least it's someone we expect now. Over the next few months, this is going to be coming out, going like gangbusters. We're just going to see sexual assault accusation after sexual assault accusation. We're going to see pedophilia exposed. We're going to see Hollywood exposed for what it is, because it truly is vile and just awful. And I think that it needs to be brought down. I'm not saying stop making movies. I'm not saying eliminate movies and TV. I'm saying just the Hollywood establishment needs to be brought down, because it is disgusting, the things they do.
Drain the swamp.
Yeah,
No,
exactly. The swamp needs to be drained.
For me, because I had suspicions he was gay. It's not like I know the guy, but like I had a feeling, and you would read all these different articles that he could be gay and whatever. So I have a friend of mine that we're really into House of Cards. We're like House of Cards fanatics.
Ooh.
So he shared the post, and like the first thing that pops up for me in the picture is I like to live my life as a gay man, and I was like, holy shit, he's gay. And then I read the entire thing, and then I read the sexual assault accusation, and I'm like, I hate myself for jumping this gun so quickly,
Right.
Because it was like, hey, completely too drunk to forget that I was a pedophile. By the way, I'm gay.
Yeah, no, ridiculous. Terrible deflection, honestly.
Like, and then Wanda Sykes tweeted, and she made a very good point. She said, "You can't hide under the rainbow."
Absolutely.
And I really agree with that because he used it as a
Yeah.
scapegoat. By the way, I'm gay.
And Milo said that too. He, as much as people don't like Milo Yiannopoulos, and as much as like there are things I don't agree with him with, he said something very important. He's like, gay people should be treated to the same standard as straight people. So you can't, just because you're gay, just be excused from something. Just because you're straight, you can't be excused for something. So yeah, that Wanda Sykes, I didn't even hear about that tweet, but she's absolutely right.
So she's like, no, you can't hide under the rainbow. Like that's not how it works.
For sure.
And I can't look at American Beauty the same way.
That's what we
yeah.
actually had a discussion. I went to a workshop, an audio workshop, and somebody said that. He's like, my favorite film was American Beauty, and I can never watch it the same way.
I can't look at it the same way because the whole movie, the premise of the whole movie, for those who don't know it, is that he's trying to bone an 18-year-old girl. It's a whole philosophical debate about will to live and, an unhappy marriage and the American nuclear family, but he's trying to bone an 18-year-old girl. That's it. Or 17.
I actually haven't seen the movie, but I mean, I'll definitely check it out.
That's the premise.
Yeah. So let's move on to our main topic, which is Trump's... Oh, my bad. Trump's impeachment. That's what I meant to do. So, let me just get my notes because I didn't memorize this. So on November 8th, it will have been 1 year since Trump's election to office. So far, his time as president has been nothing short of what the actual fuck. Throughout the year, there have been many protests by the general public and the Democrats, and even Republicans, to oust him or impeach him from office. In today's episode, we'll discuss the odds of this happening, and if so, how and when. Again, we're live on Facebook, so make sure to comment and have your thoughts read live on air. Even though you're commenting, your opinions are just as valid, and we will discuss them. So don't be afraid to say it, right? We're not going to call you out. There's not going to be any issue of that. We love hearing the differing views, and that's what we're all about. So let's start with the first question. Just a quick answer. We're approaching Trump's 1 year anniversary of being elected, right? As mentioned. How has he done so far, though? Because I've read a bunch of articles. He's got a bunch of accomplishments. He's got a bunch of failures. But, like, which one weighs more? More accomplishments, more failures,
I think he's an absolute failure. By any standard of a president, I think he's an absolute failure. He has increased the divide in the nation. He has done nothing to heal racial tensions. If anything, he has made them worse. The response to the disasters in Houston and Puerto Rico and elsewhere have been nothing short of short, basically. Like he's just not up to par with past presidents. There were a lot of echoes with the W. Bush administration in terms of how he handled the disasters. He has done nothing to protect the DACA Dreamers. I very much support the DACA program. He's just one walking sort of pile of garbage for me. And I don't mean that in like the very sort of screaming way that leftists use it. I mean, as a president, he has failed to run his nation because he has left out so much of the general population in America. And he has focused on such a niche, small population of white middle-class Americans and rich businessmen and things like that. So I think he failed completely.
Now, for me, he has disappointed me. He has not supremely disappointed me. There are things that I supported him for that he is coming through on, so far at least. Getting rid of Bannon was, I think, an absolute, just the worst mistake he's made. I think Bannon was the best influence in his administration, and it's very sad to see him go. I think Bannon was the last remaining truly right-wing person in his administration. And
do you think Bannon was a bad influence to his public image just because of...
Yep.
So,
I don't think that the public treated him fairly, and I'm not saying Bannon's perfect. I'm not saying Bannon's this paragon of morality. I just think that he was treated unfairly in general. I think that when he used the term alt-right, Steve Bannon, he didn't know what it meant. He didn't realize it was a racially charged term, which many didn't. I certainly called myself alt-right at that point when I didn't know what the true meaning was, because the general public had changed the meaning, and I think it's very fair to not know what it meant at that time. Today, there's really no excuse for not knowing what alt-right means, but at the time, totally excusable. And I think that was a huge issue that the public has been very harsh on him for. The wall prototypes are being built in San Diego right now. I like to see that. I'm really pleased with. Actually, I'm really pleased with the aesthetics of the wall. I'm really liking how it's looking. I like the one of the prototypes, how it's got
with the bars.
It's got bars going down so small animals can still pass through. You know, a lot of people are talking about how that's kind of a tease for the would-be illegal immigrants, but it is so that small animals can pass through, which I think is great. I like the environment. I'm a green conservative, and I think that's fantastic. Otherwise, he has not been a neocon in my perception, which is good to see, especially after what the missiles launched at Syria, which I was worried was the beginning of a neocon regime. Otherwise, I mean, his Twitter has really disappointed me. I was really hoping his tweets would become more presidential after he was elected. I shouldn't have really hoped for that. That was, I suppose, unrealistic hope, but I was really hoping for that. And I'm seeing a lot of America First policies coming in, a lot might not be the right term. I am seeing an America First rhetoric that is being very successfully pushed, and I like to see that. I like to see every country put their own country first, but America is a country that has not put their own country first for a long time, and I think it's great to see that they are now. Otherwise, I mean, has he really done very much? Not legislatively. He's put through some executive orders I was a fan of. He's put through some executive orders that I wasn't necessarily a fan of. I think the travel ban is good. There were countries on there that shouldn't have been on there. There are countries that aren't on there that should be on there. Chad should absolutely not be on there. I'm not sure if anybody knows why Chad is on there. They were not able to send in the documents that they were required to send in on time because they didn't have the right type of paper. I mean, Chad is not a threat. They're not a country that is exporting terrorists. They're not a threat. A country that really should be on there is Saudi Arabia, of course, but we all know that that's not going to happen. And that's the one thing to conclude that Trump has disappointed me with the most. I recognize the importance of, or not the importance, the reason, the rationale behind maintaining good relationship with Saudi Arabia. How it was explained to me was if the U.S. stops engaging with Saudi Arabia on friendly terms, some other country, China, Russia, will come in and take their place. So I think that since there is always going to be a world superpower that is maintaining good relationships with Saudi Arabia, I suppose that I see why the U.S. wants it to be them. I don't think it's moral, right? And that's my biggest issue.
And so now I want to move on to the actual topic. So obviously you guys aren't necessarily too happy with his leadership and how he's run things. But who is leading the campaign to impeach Trump, right? So he's trying to lead the country, but who's leading the idea to make him not lead the country?
Well, it seems that there's one guy in particular. He's a politician,
he's
either
a
in Congress. He's in the House of Representatives.
Do you know his name?
Al
Green.
Yeah. No, is that it?
Yeah.
Al Green? Yeah,
Al
okay.
Green. I think it's Al Green. Al Green is the Reverend.
Yeah. Hold on. I'll Google it.
I want to say Al Green, but don't quote me on that. Basically, he brought the articles of impeachment to the floor.
Which are? Just so our audience knows.
Basically, in order to impeach a president, you have to invoke the 25th
Amendment?
The 25th Amendment of the Constitution.
Al Green, it is Al Green.
It is Al Green, okay. So I'm not completely out of my mind. Basically, you have to bring the Constitution to the floor, and you have to call for the article, which is Amendment 25, and you have to state your reasons why you would be impeached. And I think the number one is treason against the nation. And
do you think he's committed treason?
I don't think so. I don't think treason is the right word. I think he has undermined American democracy. I think that...
How?
For me, it's the transparency that he has not brought forward with the whole Russia scandal. Every time they throw a Russia ball at him, he deflects it to the Clinton emails. And for me, not getting a straight answer, the longer we don't get a straight answer, the more...
Skeptical
that I get. I don't necessarily think Russia hacked the election. We've talked about this so many times. I don't think Russia had anything to gain from Trump as president, so I don't think that anything I don't think Russia did hacked the election or anything, but I do think the Trump administration colluded somehow. I think that the Russians had dirt on Clinton from her time as Secretary of State, and the Trump administration knew that, and they sort of used that advantage. And the whole reason why we're talking about this now is because his chief of staff, or former chief of staff, and one of his campaign strategists have been indicted for the same reason, colluding with Russia. There have been reports now that Russian bots on Facebook had material that had been read by up to 126 million Americans or something like that. So for me, just the sort of Mickey Mouse game that he's made of what is democracy, I think, because I'll get to this in a bit, but if we impeach Trump, we get Pence, and I think Pence is like a million times worse.
And that was actually my next question. If Trump is impeached, will Mike Pence take over? And if he does, is that a good thing?
No. But Marshall, you can.
So
I've been talking.
Now I'd like to give a disclaimer here. I'm going to say a few things in this statement that may sound very foolish or out of character at first, but I'm going to explain them. So no matter, if you think I'm saying something absolutely outrageous,
hot take.
Do not tune out right away.
I'll
So
replace,
first of all,
Daniel, hot take.
First of all, I would like to see Trump get impeached.
Oh boy.
Now, I would never say that about a president who I liked or was okay with, but I think a lot of people misunderstand what impeachment is. I would like to see Trump get impeached because being impeached does not mean that they're out of office. Bill Clinton was impeached. They are not thrown out of office upon being impeached. All it is that trial goes forward. And I would like to see him impeached. And now what's the word? When I should really know this word. When somebody is found innocent.
Not guilty, or?
There's a word for it. It's on the tip of my tongue. But anyway, I would like to see him found innocent following impeachment hearings, because I think that we need to get the true story out there. I don't know what the true story is. I'm not going to claim to have that information. There's all sorts of things that could be going on. Russia intervening in the U.S. election is not necessarily the problem. I think the problem would be a reciprocation of that.
If the U.S. did the same thing to
No. If the U.S. or if Trump and his administration were cooperating with Russia's intervention, that would be the issue. Russia intervening, like the U.S. has intervened in so many foreign elections. What do you expect is going to happen, right? Superpowers, big countries intervene in other elections in the world to suit their interest.
So then I want to know, Marshall, if he doesn't get impeached, or if he gets impeached, he's going to go to trial, and then what? While he's in trial, can he still serve?
Well, isn't it you need 2/3 of the House if you want to stay in office? Because that's what happened with Clinton.
I believe that is the case.
He got
2/3 of the House,
and then he had 2/3 of the House to back him staying in office.
And the word I was looking for was exonerated. Thank you, Humphrey and David. So I would like to see him continue to serve, ideally, during these impeachment hearings, and I would like to see him found innocent, exonerated. Because that, I think, is the best way to get the true story out there, the best way to ensure that the people are as united as they can be while Trump is president. Because I think with this ambiguity that we are seeing right now, it's very hard to trust Trump. I'm finding it very hard to trust Trump because I don't know. I'm not saying I think he's guilty of collusion, but I don't know, and I would like to know.
So do you want him ousted out of office completely?
No. I'd like him to stay in office.
Does he lose any power when he's impeached?
He, from his own party, they don't trust him.
But in terms of like presidential power, executive orders?
No.
None at all?
And it depends, of course, if he's allowed to continue serving whilst impeachment hearings are going through. Otherwise, Pence would take over as the serving vice president for the remainder of the hearings. However, following his exoneration, if that is how it were to go down, he would be, back to everything normal, like full presidential powers. And that's what I'd like to see. And so let's say he is ousted from office. Let's say he resigns and Pence takes over. I don't find that so bad. I like Pence. I don't love him necessarily, but I do like him. I think as the governor of Indiana, I really liked how he ran things there in terms of reducing inflation reducing unemployment and stimulating the economy through kind of free market methods, I found was really good for Indiana, fastest growing economy in the entire U.S. while Pence was governor, and I think he's a good fit for president.
But what do you say to the claims that, because I'm not confirming or denying anything, the claims that he supported gay conversion therapy?
Well, they aren't true. The email he sent was when he was a senator, I believe, and a bill was being tabled to fund support for AIDS and HIV support groups. And he sent an email saying, you know, this is fine if we want to do this, but I would prefer if we are not encouraging deviant sexual behavior with government funds. And he didn't, you know, people saw that and somehow interpreted he wants to electrocute all the gays. Like, you know, that is not something I necessarily agree with or disagree with. I certainly don't want to be funding deviant sexual behavior with government funds either. Him and I may have different ideas on what deviant sexual behavior is. But, you know, we don't know, and we don't have enough. There's no solid basis on which to say that he supports gay conversion therapy. So we may have disagreements on homosexuality and whatnot in terms of that general area, but we can't say he supports gay conversion therapy.
So now Adam has a completely different outlook on Pence, just based on your facial reactions to Marshall talking. What do you think about Mike Pence as a president?
When it comes to the Trump administration, I don't like Trump. I don't like his administration, but there are very few people that I despised in his administration. Betsy DeVos is one of them. Steve Bannon was another one. And Mike Pence, I hate the most. Mike Pence, for me, I am not a very traditional person. I am secular, so to see this very Christian traditionalist holding the second most important place in office for me is very concerning for me. And that's not me, you know, being a religion hater or anything. I don't care that he's a Christian. He can be a Christian in his own time. But to sit in the House of Representatives and say things like we should treat creation as a science, for me, that takes us back so far in time. And those are my beliefs, and obviously I bring my beliefs to the table, and everybody else does. But this is how I feel, and for me, the examples that we would see that we have of how he would run a presidency is how he flips the vote in a lot of the votes in the Senate. Because if a Senate vote is tied, the vice president votes, and he's voted on I think 5 bills, and he's turned them in ways that goes to benefit the very rich and wealthy, and the very I don't have any other facts to base that, but the most recent one that he tipped, basically they brought a bill to the Senate that if you group a bunch of bank customers together, you can sue your big bank for mistreatment. And Mike Pence, and the vote was split, and Mike Pence turned it in the way that you are not allowed to sue your big bank anymore. So I think he's very anti sort of the people. He's very pro government, very pro big bank. He's pro Wall Street, and you know.
Sounds a lot like Hillary.
Yeah, and those are the reasons why I didn't like Hillary. It's not like I like Trump and I love and I hate immigrants. I hate the establishment. And Mike Pence for me is very, very establishment and very, very traditional.
That is my biggest issue within the establishment.
Yeah.
However, the traditionalism I do rather admire. I think traditionalism is one of the most important things to me. Maybe not traditionalist in Ben Carson sense. I like Ben Carson, but I don't like young Earth creationism. I think that's bit silly, but now one thing I'm gonna just talk about quickly is creationism, in terms of the fact that it's a wide net. You know, there's young Earth creationists, there's creationists who believe in evolution. They are not diametrically opposed. There are creationists who don't believe in evolution, and I think that I don't know enough about what Pence believes on creationism and evolution, but I'm really hoping he's not a young Earth creationist type, or that he denies evolution. I'd have to look into that. That would be an issue for me. Now, we have a statement from Daniel, who just sent his thoughts on Trump's
Good morning,
performance.
Daniel.
He says, on an economic level, Trump has done tremendously well due to the fact that the stock market has always been rising since he held office, but race relations in the United States have gotten worse. That's not entirely his fault. Race relations started to decline with Obama, and I would largely agree with Daniel on that. I think that now the stock market rising, we can't necessarily attribute that to Trump.
I would attribute that to Obama, actually, because you know it takes a while to see Obama's policies go into play, and Trump hasn't done very much to reverse them.
That's very true. And we can't judge Trump's economic performance yet, is the way I see it, because the economy is a slow-moving machine. It's not, quick. It's not particularly volatile under normal circumstances. It's volatile under circumstances of economic bubbles and things like that, but under normal circumstances, it's not so volatile that a president can come in for a year and just tremendously improve the economy. Now, anyway, I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. Were we still on?
Just talking about Mike Pence and why you don't like him just because he's establishment.
Yeah, and so the establishment issue is a problem for me. I think that banks do not need further protection. I would wager they need less protection. That's one thing I really don't like to see privatized, and I think that in the most free market economies, the most privatized economies in the world, privatization of the banks has led to their downfalls. I'm mainly looking at Chile under the economic guidance of the Chicago Boys when Pinochet was in power, where the banks were privatized and it was a disaster. Following, huge economic prosperity, but of course the bankers got greedy.
Right. So my question, I just want to move forward. It's a question to both of you. So a lot of Trump's opponents have said that his behavior is becoming more and more erratic. Now, the 25th, again, it can potentially lead to the removal of a president. Would you rather, what's a better argument to have him impeached? Mental instability or collusion with Russia? I want to hear both your perspectives on that.
Sorry, I'm not done roasting Mike Pence. For me, I just pulled up all some of the bills that he's turned in the Senate. One of them, a big one for me that I absolutely cannot stand, is that he pushed through a plan to allow states to block funding for Planned Parenthood. I believe in funding for Planned Parenthood. I believe Planned Parenthood should continue the work that they're doing, including abortion services, and expand on the work that they're doing. Because in the time of healthcare instability in the United States, you never know when people will need care. And if women, children, and even men use Planned Parenthood, then I think that body should be in place, regardless of all the different kinks and things that they need to work out. Because obviously, every institution can be better. And also, he casted the deciding vote in the nomination of Betsy DeVos to be Secretary of Education. So you can understand that I have very distasteful opinions of him. But yeah, that's all I wanted to bring up to sort of give some evidence to the reason why I absolutely despise Mike Pence, and pretty much being the only reason why I would like to see Trump stay in office. Because how does it go? If he gets impeached, Mike Pence gets in power. If Mike Pence gets impeached, Paul Ryan gets in power. And if Paul Ryan gets impeached, I'm not entirely too sure where it goes from there. But for me, the collusion on Russia agreement, the collusion on Russia problem is what would be more likely to impeach Trump rather than a mental instability. Because Ronald Reagan had Alzheimer's, and everybody fully knew it, but they kept it under wraps in the last years of his presidency. And I don't think anybody, as president,
and I don't think it caused too.
And I don't think it caused too
much
many
of an issue.
problems, because I think he was a sitting duck by the time the Alzheimer's had really hit him hard. And also, you can say that he has a mental instability and how he photoshopped, his hand to be bigger on the portrait that he has in the White House and things like that. Like, he's a very insecure old man.
Yeah, for sure.
And I don't think that necessarily that makes you unfit to be a president. Obama smoked, and he smoked secretly while in office. Like, an unhealthy, he's unfit to be a president because he's unhealthy. Like, you can make that argument so far. You can take that argument so many different ways, and I just don't think that's fair. And I think it's very childish, actually. If you're gonna, try and dump Trump, don't, take his character, because we knew his character from the beginning.
For sure. Yeah. Now, I don't agree with everything you're saying. However, I will give you this: I think you have a much more principled stance on the issues with Mike Pence and Trump's administration than a lot of people do. I think you have very real concerns. I think that there are a lot of people who don't have very real concerns, but I do think that your concerns are very real and very valid. I don't like Betsy DeVos either. I think that people accuse Trump of not draining the swamp. disagree. I think that maybe draining the swamp wasn't necessarily it wasn't done in the best way, but I think he has done what he said he would do and drained for the most part, the career politicians out of the administration.
Yeah.
Betsy DeVos is, I think, a terrible symptom of that, and is a corrupt, both morally and in terms of
party.
Yeah, I don't like her one bit, and I don't like anything she's doing. And
I don't like charter schools, and I'm very pro public school, and I know public schools are terrible in the United States, but I'm still pro public school, and she's very anti.
Yeah, and I think public schools should be getting more funding in the States.
Yeah.
And yeah, I just don't like her one bit. Now, I'm sorry, Elliot, I forgot your question while we were discussing that.
It was whether he's going to get. Whether a better argument is him being ousted because of mental instability because of collusion with Russia.
Of course. So I think that Trump is a guy who grew up very wealthy, kind of in a bubble of wealth, and that I can see having some issues on someone's psyche and the way they perceive the world. I don't think it's a good way for anybody to grow up. Nothing wrong with growing up rich, but I think growing up ultra rich can really take a toll on the way you perceive reality, and can keep you a bit out of touch with people. Yeah. I think that I know that he's also very old. He's, the
70,
oldest president.
He's 70.
Oldest president the U.S. has ever had. And when you get to that age, certain mental capacities aren't as strong as they used to be. I think that might be a bit of an issue, and I think that explains the Twitter. Along with a bit of insecurity, or a lot of insecurity. And I don't like the insecurity. I really don't like the insecurity. I've always had in interpersonal relationships, I've always really taken issue with people who are, nothing wrong with people being insecure, but people who are insecure and overcompensate because of it. That's the biggest turnoff for me in terms of whether I'm going to be friends with somebody. And the same applies to a president or someone holding elected office. We have somebody watching us from Alabama, so thank you, Karina, for referring to your cousin to us.
Oh, Karina, yeah. Thanks, Karina, for tuning in.
So, no, I don't think he will be impeached because of his perceived mental instability or mental issues or anything like that, but I do see it as a problem in some ways, and I wish that his administration exercised more control over him, over the manifestations that his insecurity can take.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So I have, sorry, did you want to say something?
No, I just wanted to say my father gave me a small loan of $1 million, and that's all I really wanted to say.
Fair enough. So I have two very quick questions, just very quick responses. It's been rumored that he might not run again in 2020, Trump. My question to you guys is, would you rather him be impeached or resign?
I would say neither. If anything, I would rather him be impeached because that gives him a chance to stay in office. And again, if he resigns, Mike Pence takes over, and then I would hate living. Actually, I wouldn't because I'm in Canada and it's very irrelevant. But I would, as far as a world image goes, and my solidarity and sympathy with minorities in the United States, Pence is much worse than Trump. Mm-hmm. And Pence, it's all about the party. The party chooses whether or not you want to run. The party believes what's good for it and what's not. The Republican Party knows they messed up with Trump. He's not good for the party. Mm-hmm. But Pence is very traditional.
Yeah, the party
Republican.
likes him. And that's why I went with him.
The party likes him. And that's why, exactly. That's why Trump went with him. So if Pence goes in power, then he would run again in 2020, which would be the worst thing ever.
So now, as we get closer to 2020, and I don't think Trump will resign, and I don't think he will be ousted from office, but let's say neither of those happen, but he still chooses not to run for office again in 2020, which has only been done once before by a president, I believe. It would depend on who is rumored to be or who is thinking of running, because I, for example, don't want Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson as the president. I love The Rock. I personally love The Rock and think he's absolutely a fantastic actor, and from what I can see, he seems like a great guy. I don't want him as the president. It just depends on who's running, because I'd rather Trump than some goofball celebrity. I mean, I know Trump is a goofball celebrity.
That's what I was going to say.
But do we want another one? That does not set a good precedent to have two goofball celebrities after another. So it all depends. I don't mind Pence if he takes over, but if Trump were to not run again, just depends on who wants to run after him.
Yeah, I don't want Mark Zuckerberg to run either. I think that would be like the worst thing ever because he's so globalist, and I sound like Alex Jones, but he's so. Ugh. Anyway, well, I don't even know where I was going with that, but I don't want Trump. I want Trump impeached, maybe for the same reason that Marshall does, to sort of get an answer, like a final answer on what went down with Russia during the election. It won't change my life. It won't affect anything. But I think in the spirit of democracy and for democracy, we need to know what happened.
And my last question, really, it's very quick. We've talked about how he can be impeached. We've talked about whether you want him to be impeached. The question is he going to be impeached?
I don't think so. Unless he, royally screws up, I don't think the party would want to see him impeached because that would ruin the chances of a 2020 Republican government. And the Republicans are on cloud nine. They have majority in the Senate and the House. They haven't had that since 1929. They don't want to screw that up, and especially people like Mitch McConnell and even John McCain. What did they call him?
I can't remember.
When he voted against the healthcare bill.
Yeah, no, I can't remember. Now, I don't think it's plausible, but I think it's very possible for sure. It would all depend on whether things come out about Trump actually having a hand in any sort of collusion or obstruction of justice. No matter what happens to his administration, Manafort and all these other guys who may or may not be colluding with Russia, as long as Trump is never shown to have a hand in it or a hand in obstructing justice of any sort, then nothing's going to happen to him. His administration may crumble, but he will remain.
Fair enough. So, I think that was a very good discussion this episode, to be honest. Would have loved Daniel to be here as well.
Maverick.
Oh.
John McCain called the Maverick.
Oh, yes, okay.
Yeah. I don't even think the Maverick wants to see the Republicans lose majority.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So, that was our show. And thank you to everyone that tuned in and that messaged us live. Keep those messages coming, because we want to hear from you. We want to hear your thoughts on all this, because there's so much Adam and Marshall I can take. Totally kidding. I love these guys.
Roasted.
Love these guys. That was our show for this week. Brand new episode of the Raben Report will be coming to you next week, hopefully with Daniel back. Same day, same time,
miss you,
same
buddy.
people. We do miss you. Have a great day, everyone.